Hello, Faith United youth and others. Welcome to our youth video here the very last tail end of May. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. My allergies are going crazy today, so if I sound a little off, that's why. I hope I don't sneeze. I'm going to try to make it through without sneezing this whole video. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's kind of uncomfortable, which is failure. And I was thinking about this because I had a devotional sent to me that the book says failure in big letters on the front of it, and I was kind of like, hey, what are you saying? But the more I dig into it, the more I feel like well, let me clarify, it actually says how God works through failure. They just made failure really, really big. You know, it's funny because I tend to take failure very badly. Some people are very good at just kind of, you know, doing something wrong and then moving on with their lives like nothing happened. I am not that type of person. I am the type of person who at 4 a.m. is thinking about how literally last night I did this. I went shopping yesterday at Aldi at a new one that I hadn't been to before, and I realized about halfway through that I was going down the wrong way on some of the aisles, and I just felt so awful. And in the middle of the night last night I was thinking about that and just like beating myself up over it, which is, I recognize, very ridiculous, but that is how I treat myself when I encounter failure on my part. And that's a very small example of something that is really stupid, but you know, I was also thinking this week about how I'm very sad right now about some things, and you know, we would normally be preparing for Youth Annual Conference at this point. We would have a lot of things kind of coming together for the final details for mission trip, and I'm very sad about it. And I'm sad about it because there was a lot of work that was done ahead of time. You know, we did a lot of things. I prepared a lot of things, and we, you know, kind of as a group prepared a lot of things, and it's kind of coming to the time when we would have done some of these things, and there's sadness involved there. And I recognize that that is not my personal failure, but that I take it very hard, and I just, you know, I think that failure is something that is good as a Christian to look at and see that God can use failure. I want to start with a really, really beautiful thing that I came across, and that is called, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, it's a Japanese thing, and it's called kintsugi. I'm 90% sure I said that wrong, so feel free to, in your head, correct me as I'm failing talking about failure. But this kintsugi is called, it's Golden Journey. And what happens is, it's the Japanese art of, they take a broken piece of pottery and they mix a lacquer with gold or silver or platinum. So when they fix this piece of pottery, you can see exactly where the cracks were, okay? And they basically are highlighting the cracks as part of the life of the object. So they're choosing to showcase the imperfections and the failures of this piece of pottery instead of hiding it. And there's a Japanese philosophy apparently called wabi-sabi, which basically they embrace the flaws and the imperfections. And I think this is a really beautiful thing, and I think that, you know, as Christians we can see that God does this in our lives as well, okay? So it's kind of a principle that God does where He takes our failures and our imperfections and He uses them for His good and for His glory. I want to turn to the Bible and just kind of highlight this a little bit. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, what's happening is God has up to this point kind of set David as king in his palace, and he, you know, David has had a long journey getting to where he is finally in his kingdom. He is settled. He is finally just kind of probably taking his first breath after defeating many enemies along the way, kind of having to take over from Saul, and Saul was not having it, and so there was a lot of turmoil there. And so David is coming to the place where he is finally able to be in his kingdom, and he's breathing. And this is what happens. So I'll highlight some of these verses. So 2 Samuel 7, so it says, "After the king was settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, 'Here I am, living in a house of cedar while the ark of God remains in a tent.'" So David is kind of basically looking around and like, okay, I'm settled, this is great, breath, but wait a minute, God is still in a tent, and how could I be in this house of cedar, this beautiful palace, while God is just kind of out there in a tent, and they hadn't created his sanctuary yet, they hadn't basically made his temple yet, and so David is really, really not okay with that. And so he talks to Nathan the prophet, and Nathan replies to him, and he says, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." But that night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan. And basically, I'll just kind of paraphrase, what God tells Nathan about David is that, he's been with them the whole time. He's dwelt with them. And I encourage you to go ahead and read this for yourselves. But for time's sake, I'm kind of paraphrasing. And basically, what God tells David through Nathan is, "I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you rule over my people Israel." Basically, I've been with you this whole time. And he says in verse 11, he says, "I will give you rest from your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When the days are over and you rest with your offsprings, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son." And he goes on, he says, "My love will never be taken away from him," and so on and so on. And so Nathan goes to David, and he basically says, this is what God says. He says, "I know you probably feel like you want to do this thing for me because, he's God and he's in a tent, and I think that David is probably feeling maybe like a bit of a failure for having not done this thing for the Lord while he himself is resting in his own palace." And God is basically saying, "David, I've got a plan. And that plan involves your son, who eventually Solomon comes along and has a heart for building this glorious, beautiful temple for God. And it's world renowned, and even to this day, historians know about Solomon's temple. And so, the point of the story is, if you're not picking up on it, we all have broken pieces of our lives. And we all have things that we feel like we're a failure in. Now, I told you a story about me at Aldi, which is just the most dumb story. I have huge wrong things that I have in my life, huge failures. And, I think that if you can gain encouragement from me, who tends to beat myself like a drum over and over for the things that I've done wrong, I hope that you can listen to this, because I need to take it in too, and that is that God has a plan even for our failures. God has good things in store, and just like that Japanese art that I can't pronounce, where, God wants to even use our failures and those broken pieces of our life and highlight them so that others can learn from us, so that others can grow from us, so that others can see how God can piece together the brokenness of our lives and breathe life into it. And so in the midst of our failures, we can wake up every morning putting the day from the past behind us, because we know that God's mercies are new every morning. And I hope that that's encouraging to you. I know that many of us probably feel like we can't handle all of the balls that we're juggling. We may feel like we're failing over here, failing over there. I know that I have felt like that with, being home with my kids and working and trying to do all of the things. And even all of the events that we've had to cancel and things like that. But please know that God has a purpose. He does have a plan for all of this mess. And I think that we will see as time unfolds, and it may be generations from now, as David had to experience with Solomon, but we'll see God piecing together the brokenness and having purpose. And the beautiful thing about that brokenness is that it can come together as a piece of pottery, and it can still be used, and it can be useful, and God can fill it up, which is a beautiful thing. So I hope that you guys are encouraged. I'm very thankful I made it through this video without sneezing, and I hope you guys are well, and I look forward to seeing you soon whenever we can gather together again. So God bless you guys. Thank you so much for paying attention tonight. Thanks. Bye.